Interesting topic today. Things school doesn't teach you. We get this every now and then from people. They want to know if college is actually worth it nowadays.
Expert University presents Entrepreneurs Online, a podcast for real talk about running a real business online. Here are your hosts, Chris Keefe and Todd Snively.
All right, Chris, it's time again. And this is a pretty interesting topic today. We get questions all the time. We get questions from people in school, people thinking of going to school. They want to know about the things that school doesn't teach you because they want to know if school nowadays is worth it. And I think you have some really interesting perspectives on this because you just put a son in school, didn't you?
I did. I get mocked sometimes with people that don't understand age demographics, and they call me a boomer. And it's kind of funny because I think officially you're a boomer. I am very much smack dab in the Gen Xer range, but I am that person. I'm that cohort in the kind of in the middle here, going, man, you old people. Yeah, it was tough. I was able to put myself. My wife and I paid for our own school. We work 3 and 4 jobs, and this sounds like that. Uphill, going to school uphill in the wintertime, both ways, blah, blah, blah. And I was able to afford to do that. I don't think you can do that nowadays. So the question does come up, affordability. But then the things school doesn't teach you is interesting because what can you learn? Can you learn what you need in university at that expense? It's a tough one, and I think that's the debate for the ages. Because my son was just this past fall. I mean, forget about pandemic stuff. I put him into school, so it is that question loomed large for me. Being an entrepreneur, a guy that left the corporate world, became an entrepreneur. Do you go into the entrepreneur world? Do I promote that? Do I say heck with school? Now, at full disclosure, my son is in school, so I that actually leads a lot to one of the reasons I started to become an entrepreneur. I've been very fortunate. I've stacked away some dollars, and I made it a point that I wanted to pay for his school. I wanted to have a situation he didn't have to work 3 jobs like I had to pay for school. And if I didn't have the cash in the bank, I didn't think I wanted to let him go to school, because I personally, I don't think it's worth $150,000 loan or so, whatever the number is, big numbers. And then the question is, when he's in school, things that school doesn't teach you is a tough one. The things they don't teach, the entrepreneurial things, the stuff. Real quickly, my son had the story of he came back one day from school in an accounting kind of situation, and I was talking business, my business, and what was going on, what you and I were doing, and this kind of thing. And he said, "Well, why isn't that covered?" And I'm like, "What do you mean? Why isn't that covered?" "Well, the things you're talking about right now." And then it gave me a pause, and I realized those things aren't taught, right? But then I started thinking to myself, well, that's a good point. I think it's somewhat covered in like an accounting or math or basics. But then I started to look at, why are people stuck with student loans? Why do they have such high interest rates? Why does the automobile industry let you know it's only $200 a month for the car? That doesn't relate at all to what does the car cost? What's the depreciation on said car? So these are things that just don't get taught. And you kind of scratch your head and say, well, what is worth that degree? I mean, what's your opinion? You're a little bit older, different demographic. What's your opinion? Is university, is college a thing that someone must do, maybe should do, shouldn't do? What do you think?
Well, I'll tell you, I've got so many soapboxes on this that I could get on. It's amazing. But let's start with my first soapbox. And because people do ask, especially, they come to us as business consultants and coaches, and they're in that situation. Some people have just started college and they're questioning that decision, especially based on their goals. And then others are headed that way. And we get it from parents too. So the first thing that I try to decide or tell them to think about is college necessary to what their end goal is? For example, if you want to be a doctor or a lawyer, something that requires college, you don't have much of a choice. You have to go, right? You're not going to become a lawyer or a doctor without being properly schooled. So that's one thing. But even the people that decide that that's what they want to do, if you think about it, more times than not, that type of person is going to end up in their own business or their own practice or some sort of business environment once they do graduate. And I think the doctors and the lawyers probably are less equipped when they come out of college to actually handle a real business, if you will. So if your end goal gives you no choice, you have to go. I mean, that's the bottom line on that. Now, if you've got, to your point, you're talking about the costs. Wow, the costs, in my opinion, are completely out of control at this point. And I was reading a lot of stories this last year here, with the COVID and everything like that, where colleges were basically shutting down the campus, shutting down all of the student activities, all of the sporting events, and everything was going to virtual classrooms. And a lot of the students were like, hey, wait a minute. I'm paying all of this money for what's called the college experience, not just the education. And you've removed 85% of the college experience, yet you're either charging the same or charging more in some cases. And I didn't like the school's justifications. We're talking about major universities, major, really high level schools. And their justification was, well, it cost us a lot of money to make this pivot to the virtual education. And the education's the same. It's the same education. That was their argument. And that one kind of bothered me. And I think it brings up the point that most colleges, universities are for-profit operations. I mean, they need to make money. That's how they exist. And a lot of them do depend on alumni donations and depending on their situation. But these private colleges, I mean, they need the tuition. They would go out of business just as fast as an airline or a car company or a restaurant, if you will.
I think it's kind of a fox guard in the henhouse to that very point. And I think in the vein of things school doesn't teach you, that's it. How school works and why it works that way. And I think that no one really wants to expose that underbelly, right? And say, hey, here's how really the education system works, higher education works. And do you have to pay the money you're paying? Could you get a similar education from a lower cost school? That's never explored, right? I mean, the conversation around the school and should you go to school, shouldn't you go to school? To your exact point, you don't have the discussion. Yes, it's more imperative that you do so. If I want someone operating on my brain, if I had a problem with my head, I clearly want someone that went to a really, really good school and spent the time to get the education, of course. Do I want the person that's doing my HVAC to have a college degree? I really don't care. In fact, I'd kind of not want that. I'd want the person that's been doing that stuff as a journeyman and an apprentice and a journeyman, and then that's been doing that since they were 15, 16 years old. That would be a fantastic thing to see, and we've oddly moved away from that in this country. And I understand it. We don't have to go in the whole education system, but those are things they don't teach you in school, and that's a big one. You scratch your head and say, why wouldn't we talk about that? Where you want to go, what your aspirations are. And I think that's the struggle I think people have with justifying either in cost or what you're learning or what you're not learning. I think it's worth it to have the discussion where you want to go and can you get it at a lesser cost.
I think that's a good point. And I think that kind of touches on this issue that many of these kids that end up going to university or college nowadays, they don't have a clue what they want to do. So they're thinking at some point in the next 4 years of higher learning, they're going to have some sort of epiphany or at a minimum be forced to decide on what it is they're going to study, what their degree is going to be, and ultimately what they come out of university, trained in. Because school does not teach you, how to sell, how to think, how to negotiate, how to face failure, how to manage time, how to invest money, the principles of success, right? It just doesn't teach that. So when people ask me, should I go to college or whatnot? I mean, one of the first things I say to them is, if you're willing to pay a ton of money to have what I term the college experience, go and have that experience, right? And for a lot of kids, that's drinking too much, lots of sex, doing some drugs, and attending classes every now and then. That's a pretty expensive experience because I think you can do most of that without university, right?
I was going to say, not to be disrespectful, but you can do that in a week in Vegas for a tenth of the cost of, probably a 50th of the cost of a full college education. If that's the college experience you're looking for.
I know. One of my, I am old. You pointed it out. You were very matter of fact. You didn't call me old. You called me a boomer, but. I was trying to sit down the other day and remember how many colleges I've actually attended, and I think it's 6. So I've been to 6.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I've been to 6 different
That's awesome.
institutions of higher learning, and for a long time, I can't pin an exact, date on this, but there was a very long period of time where I was ashamed to tell people that I didn't have a college degree. I had attended all of these different places, trying to get all of my credits in order. Got very, very close, probably within 2 classes, 6 credit hours of finishing a bachelor's degree. But I never finished. And I told this story to somebody one time, and they said to me, why did you never finish? And it was interesting. When I sat down and actually figured it out, the first time that I didn't finish was pretty simple because I was at the Air Force Academy, and I had a pilot slot. My eyes got bad, and I lost my pilot slot, and so I lost my reason for being there. But when I left the Air Force Academy to pursue flying commercially, that was like a kind of a dream for me at that time. If I couldn't fly for the Air Force, I wanted to fly for somebody, right? So I always had it in my mind that I was going to finish my degree because to get the really good jobs flying, you needed a college degree. So that goes back to what we were saying earlier. If you have to have the degree, then you have no choice. You have to go. And I thought I was in that situation, but it was interesting because every time after I got out of the Air Force that I would try to attend college, I was also running a business. And the business would start to, I don't want to say consume me, but it requires attention. A business is like a baby in a lot of ways. And you have to know, how to handle it, right? There's probably less of an owner's manual, for running a business, than there is for raising a child. But the fact of the matter is, I would get successful with the business. The business would take up more of my time. And here I am going and arguing philosophy, with some college professor, for hours. And it just never felt right. So I would always end up leaving school with the idea of I can always come back. I can always finish this. And I would go and I'd run my business. And I'd make my money. Then I'd sell a business. And then I'd be, maybe I should go back to school. And I go back to school. I'll never forget this one time. It was actually a business school, a local business school. And I was taking the night classes because I was also starting another business and getting that going. And I remember sitting there, and the person running the class had a regular job also. He was I think he was an accountant or something, and he was running a class on how to start a business. And I would try to ask him these questions without being, too snarky. It's like, well, is this your business or are you working for somebody? Oh no, I'm in a big firm. Okay. Have you ever run a business? Nope, sure haven't, but and after a while, I started to realize they're paying this guy like $38,000 to teach this class. He's making $50,000, $60,000 in his regular job. And in the business that I'm running, I'm almost making more money than that. And it just didn't make sense to me. So I kind of lost sight of the value of education. But in my mind, I felt that was the wrong way to feel. And so I was embarrassed for a long time. If the subject ever did come up, what college did you go to? I didn't know how to answer that question for a long time because at some point I had attended 6 different ones and still didn't have a degree. And when I look back, I can honestly say the only reason I never finished school is because I was busy being successful in a business. Then after a while, I just woke up and for myself, I didn't see the point anymore.
Yeah.
So this is why now when younger people say, should I go to college? Because they're entrepreneurial. They understand that maybe college isn't going to teach them how to read a financial statement, how taxes work, how to find your real passion so that you can get up in the morning and want to do these things, especially when you're working for yourself. They certainly don't teach how to manage time. I mean, if anything, they set you up to fail a lot of ways. But
and I think that's the hard part. I think that, again, we kick this off with the question of things school doesn't teach you, and that's the big. I think that's the big one, is how to look at your continuing education, and that's the funniest thing to me. I think that's the big thing they should be teaching. I think there are a lot of people. We're coming from an entrepreneurial perspective, and I'm coming from a perspective of a dad who just put a kid in school. Why would you do that? You're an entrepreneurial guy. You preach entrepreneurial stuff. I will tell you that there are those that have no proclivity whatsoever, at least in the early stages of entrepreneurship. And I think a lot of it has to do with what is not taught in schools, what is not that conversation kind of a day-to-day basis. It's a foregone conclusion. You go to school now to get you have to check the box. What used to be a high school degree back in the day is now a college degree without any real indication. And kids are kind of confused by that. And my son was confused by that. Like, well, do you have to go to school for something? I'm like, well, technically speaking, certainly not. But you kind of need to check that box if you want a job with anything related to non-entrepreneurship stuff. Did you go to school? Did someone care where you went? No. Does someone really care what your GPA is? No. But did you go to college? Yeah. I was just doing some insurance stuff today. And they ask you in the drop-down menu, what's your education level? What on earth does that have to do with anything? So it's this kind of thing where you have to go through the process. So if it's just that, I think that's not taught either. You can get the same thing at your community college, or you can go somewhere really inexpensively or get some stuff online. And what a lot of people don't know is transfer the credits to the one place for the last semester of some high-end expensive school if you really want that marquee
The diploma
degree.
still has that name of the final school you went to, right? It doesn't.
Exactly.
It wouldn't have an asterisk and saying, "Oh yeah, Todd went to these 5 other schools also." But you made a very, very good point. Back when I was looking at higher education and finishing that college degree, anything that was taught online was really looked down on. I mean, it actually was right up there with correspondence schools, which basically you were telling people you couldn't get into a real school if you had to take classes online. Nowadays, there's been this shift where online education has taken off because, one, it makes so much more sense. 2, it's nowhere near as expensive as a college degree. And 3, you get to learn something that's actually meaningful. If you want to learn how to sell, how to become a better salesperson, you can learn that online through many online courses that have nothing to do with universities. You want to learn how to negotiate, face failure, manage time, manage money, what success really is, the principles of success, dealing with your passion. You can do that with online education, which is, I forget the number. It's going to be is it like a $350 billion a year industry? And what I wonder is, how are these brick and mortar universities looking at this and not seeing the writing on the wall for them? I mean, there's only a handful of institutions in this country that could survive on their reputation, right? They've been around for so long. But every other brick and mortar institution has to be shaking in their boots at what's happening with online education and the fact that you can actually structure a program that when you finish it, you're going to know how to handle money, right? You're going to know how to make an impact with your business, how to start a business, how to communicate well, everything like that. And you're going to be successful. You're going to be in charge of your own destiny. And you're not going to have a lot of student debt because the online education is a fraction of what it costs to attend a conventional, and I'm going to start calling them brick and mortar schools, because I think that's a good label for what's happening in general, brick and mortar retail versus what's happening with online sales and e-commerce.
Yeah, school doesn't teach you those things. And I've been, full disclosure, I've been around academia most of my life. My wife's she's got a master's degree. She's been in education. She continues to be in education. I've lived at private schools. My son went to private education, Montessori, all the way up to private high school. And there is this sort of collective agreement amongst everybody to sort of ignore the very thing you're talking about. It's very odd that we've got, and that we won't talk about the education system as a whole, but it's a pretty antiquated sort of view. Like, it really is still this idea of the schoolhouse is in the very middle of the community, where the smart person comes from the big city to teach the people that come from afar and go to that kind of the schoolhouse and learn. Now, that sounds oversimplified, but what are we doing? We send the people, our kids, we send them over to the smart people at the universities. I mean, that in the online world, you're exactly right. That we're dealing with such an oddly antiquated system, and even seeing the classes my son's taking. Well, you're required to take this, a philosophy class, and you're required to take this class. You're required, and I'm like, why? To what end? It's such an odd thing to see. So they don't teach you that in school. They don't teach the kids that in school. And I think we're rounding that corner, and I think we're seeing it, as you said, in online education. I think you can become an expert in things. I know you can become an expert in many things right now online a heck of a lot faster than 4 years. I think you can be better than most people. You just have to get that focus of where you want to go, what you want to do, and get your arms around that. So I think early on, if you don't have that direction, and who does at 17, 18, 19 years old, I think we don't have that necessarily. So I think that sort of the college experience, I don't think you said sex, drugs, and rock and roll kind of. I think it's also more learn how to learn how to adult, learn the things you probably should have taught that school doesn't teach you in the previous years. So, I think we could speed that process up. So I think it's a great conversation to have. And when I'm asked, should someone go to school or not? If you don't know where you're going, you have zero direction, I would say yeah. But I would say do it if you can afford it, and do it in a way that does not saddle you with massive amounts of debt. I mean, that's the answer that I'd give people.
Yeah, and I tell you, when people ask us, we founded Expert University, and people ask us every now and then, hey, what's this Expert University? Bottom line, it's there to teach you the things that school doesn't teach you, right? How to think, how to face failure, how to manage time, the principles of success, how to start a business, and especially an online business. So, here's our shameless plug. If you want to learn a little bit more about what we're doing, go to expertuniversity.com. You can subscribe to our podcast there, matter of fact, so that you never miss any of these golden nuggets of discussion, and look into the different ways that we teach. We have several pillars that we believe in on that what people should be doing to create online incomes. So, well, this was really interesting, Chris, and I hope people don't decide to go to a brick and mortar institution just for the sex, drugs, and rock and roll. But
they should probably brand it as such. I think that would be more honest. That would be more honest marketing. And they come on, just tell them what it is.
I think they probably do have that metric out there somewhere. When the kids are looking to go to a school, they do try to figure out, well, what level of sex, drugs, and rock and roll is this school rated?
Playboy used to have that list, right? I mean, that wasn't they would put out the top 10 party schools, so that was a metric for the KPIs. I'm sure the universities didn't love that, and I'm sure internally they don't track it, but somebody was obviously. But yeah, good conversation.
All right, man. Well, we'll catch everybody the next time. Don't forget to subscribe. If you're watching this on YouTube, smash that subscribe button. They got that little bell thing. And, matter of fact, maybe we'll just let Elmer tell you about that. All right, Chris. Take care, man.
See you.
Hey, everyone. Elmer here. Todd and Chris wanted me to remind you that if you're getting anything out of these videos, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the Expert University channel. Smash that bell icon so you never miss another episode. Oh, when you get to be my age, getting reminded of important things comes in nice and handy. Oh, peace out and see you later, alligator.